Hi, my name is Mary Beth Gilliam, and this is the Outperform Cancer podcast, where we discuss anti-cancer strategies found in peer-reviewed quality research. Most cancer care today follows a familiar path. One treatment, wait, scan, see if there's progression, repeat. But what if that model is fundamentally too slow for disease that evolves? What if cancer isn't a single problem that we need to solve, but rather a complex, adaptive system that needs to be continuously monitored, understood, and, most importantly, outpaced? Today's guest, Sid Sijbrandij, faced that exact reality. After going through the best standard of care at one of the top hospitals in the world, he was told the words that no cancer patient wants to hear: there's nothing more we can do. But instead of accepting that, Sid did something different. He stepped out of patient mode and into what he calls founder mode, applying the same principles he used to build GitLab to build a completely new approach to cancer. What he's created isn't just a treatment plan, it's a new operating system for cancer, one built on maximal diagnostics, rapid iteration, testing treatments in parallel, and continuously learning from every signal the body produces. In other words, it's a system designed to integrate many inputs, tame biological complexity, and stay ahead of an evolving disease. In this conversation, we break that system down, not just as Sid's story, but as a playbook that patients can start using for themselves. We talk about how to think about cancer as a dynamic system, what data actually matters and how to get it, how to evaluate treatments when phase 3 evidence doesn't exist, the role of cutting-edge tools like personalized cancer vaccines, and what you can do starting this week to take a more active role in your care. Because this episode is not about doing everything Sid's done. It's about understanding how to think differently so that you can make better decisions for yourself. This is a new operating system for cancer. Now let's get into it. Sid, welcome to the Outperform Cancer podcast.
Thanks for having me, Mary Beth. Glad to be here.
You've been very public about your diagnosis of osteosarcoma and the progression of your disease. I'd like to start by asking you to talk to us about the mindset you had when you were first diagnosed and how it shifted when your medical team told you there was nothing more they could do for you.
When I got the initial diagnosis, I was like, okay, I'm at one of the best hospitals in the world. I'm in good hands, and I was very qualified professionals. They had a plan. I said, just do the maximum, go all out. I want to get this cured. They went all out. I did all the standard of care, did everything that was in there, including 2 forms of radiation, all the chemo. And that was the mindset. I had one oncologist. He had a great plan, and I followed that. And when it was away for 1 year, and then when it came back, it was like, hey, we tried all the medicines that make sense. I don't have anything else I'd recommend to you. Maybe there's a trial. The osteosarcoma is a rare form of cancer. I have a strange HLA. There wasn't anything. And then it was like, oh, wow, I'm default dead now. But I learned, I did one thing. I did one single patient IND in the previous journey from a friend, my best friend actually, who had a biotech company. Over time, I started investing in this company. And then when I had the cancer, he helped me with looking beyond the standard of care, and we took the medicine that he developed. And that opened up my eyes, like, okay, there is something possible outside the standard of care. So when I was faced with the new standard of care was kind of done, I was like, okay, well, now it's time to look beyond what we can do. And I recognize you have to do that. No doctor's going to do that for you. You have to drive that either as a patient advocate or as a patient. And I quit my day job and started focusing on this full time.
Yeah, it is a full-time job. I know what you mean. I left my job shortly after I was metastatic to focus on just, trying to stay alive. It's a tough thing to do. Looking back, do you wish that you had approached things differently when you were first diagnosed? Like, you've talked about going founder mode on your cancer once you heard the words, "There's nothing more we can do for you." Do you wish you'd gone founder mode on day one?
I I think my treatment might have largely been the same, but
Mhm.
in hindsight, I do wish I looked beyond standard of care from day one. I think one thing that I would have loved to do is preserve more tissue. I had a big resection. It was done, in my case, because I was in a lot of pain. It was done before any chemo or anything else. That's great tissue to use for sequencing. That's great tissue to do testing against off drugs, but you gotta preserve it. And all of that tissue got FFPE and is not viable for the things I'd like it to. So that's one clear thing I would have done different. And then I would have probably done more sequencing on that. This time they tested for like a bunch of factors, but I would have done whole genome. I probably would have done single cell RNA. I would have done spatial, and I would have kind of looked through that.
So, thinking about those things, first, would you just define FFPE for people? I don't know that they know what that is.
Yeah. So if you get your cancer resected, the hospital keeps a copy. They do that for everyone. So it's a huge cost to them, and they fixate it. Um, they fixate it with formaldehyde or whatever it's called, and they fix it in wax. And that way, it's easy for them to go back later and say, "How did this look?" Take a slice out of it. But what you can no longer do is build it up in a lab and test medicine against it, because for that you need fresh tissue. Fresh can be cooled, can be cryopreserved, but it means not dead.
So, how it's preserved matters in terms of what you can do with it for the future. So, that's pretty important. And you had mentioned you would have done like more testing, like more genomic testing. And so, based on that, like, what would you have done with that information? Or, like, do you have insights into how that would have unfolded for you?
What we learned is that there's a lot of FAP tissue present in the tumor. We learned that I'm high on something called MDM2. I'm not sure. I never did the replay like what we have chosen different treatments. The standard
Mhm.
of care is standard for a reason.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's proven.
Mhm.
It's sometimes a bit out of date, but it represents the best knowledge we had. I don't think I would have not done the things I've done. I do think I might have added some treatments to them.
Yeah, that's kind of where my head is at because that's what my approach was as I was slowly kind of learning that there was more out there than standard of care, and that there was some different thinking that existed, and really expanding what I was looking at as a patient. And it was always really that standard of care is the foundation. I mean, like that, as you said, like it's been tested, there's a reason it's the standard, but thinking about layering on opportunities to show improvement. And that was just a big part of my mindset. And it sounds like it's a big part of your mindset now.
Yep.
And that might kind of reflect back on your background as the founder of GitLab, the software platform that many software teams use to build and test and deploy their code. I'm a little familiar with it because I used to be the chief operating officer for a robotics company that developed a lot of software.
Oh, cool.
I think it's interesting that both cancer and software development are very complex and adaptive systems that evolve over time and require iterative problem solving. I see a lot of parallels. I'm wondering if you can briefly describe, what GitLab is for those who don't know, and how your experience building GitLab affected your approach to your cancer treatment and your vision for the future of cancer care today.
So GitLab is a way to do DevOps, to build software to plan for it, to build it, to test it, to roll it out, to monitor it, and have that informed. So it helps you make the DevOps loop. One analogy you could draw is the DevOps loop is that in software, and the faster it is, the faster you improve. I think with cancer, it's not the case today, but with cancer, you're starting to see that there's more diagnostic in the loop, and those timelines are getting down. And that's happening in a couple of ways. For example, you used to have only imaging to look at what the cancer is doing. Is it growing or shrinking? Now you have ctDNA test. And imaging you do every few months. ctDNA tests you can do every few weeks because they're less intrusive and more affordable. I now take a lot of immune therapy, and we're able to kind of measure the immune system. We do flow cytometry in single cell. We'll look at like what's getting expressed in the immune system. That still requires a lot of expense and effort right now, but you could see that getting more common. And with the cancer, we've kind of taken biopsies and we do a whole genome sequencing, and you kind of see the cancer evolve, start expressing new things. We're starting to see now that some companies are able to design mRNA vaccines that take into account the cancer evolving. Like the cancer is here now, we think it's going to evolve that way, and we're going to already try to address that. Cancer cells are very similar to your own cells. So every bit of differentiation you can identify helps. We're getting much better microscopes in the form of sequencing. And we're now able to construct drugs much more easily. And that can take the form of an mRNA vaccine, which is like 2,000 base pairs, which is like, it's almost like old computer programs where you had 8 kilobytes. We're also making a CAR T drug, and there we're adding an end gate. And there are some people making kind of Turing complete drugs now, where they can account for all kinds of things. So really the cost of sequencing and construction coming down in AI is turning biology a lot more into informatics. We're not there yet. It's a lot of art involved in all of this, but it's starting to shift.
Yeah, I find it super interesting at this juncture, right? Because it feels like there's a lot of things coming together to create a moment for breakthrough. And I know that you've started a number of companies recently based on your experience with your own cancer. Um, is there something you could tell us about your choice in which companies you selected, like where you're putting your effort and why you're putting your effort there? What do you expect that impact to be on cancer care for patients?
Yeah, we start companies around things that me and other patients are running into and are solving ourselves. The other thing that they say at Y Combinator about startup founders, they're relentlessly resourceful. When you put a barrier in their way, they'll try to go around it, and they'll try to figure something out. And I think we're getting more and more patients who are able to do that. And I think what's changing is that the cost of approving a medicine is now more than 1,000 times as much as dosing one patient. Cost of dosing one patient is coming down. The cost of approving a medicine is going up. So you're starting to see patients who are able to use these costs coming down to take control of their care. And we then run into all kinds of roadblocks. And then for some of these roadblocks, you're like, this was ridiculous. Like it shouldn't have been this hard. I think a good example is a company we started, Kernus. And Kernus, their specialty is the tissue hostage negotiation with the hospital. It's extremely hard to get your own tissue out of a hospital. And every non-cancer patient will be like, what is this for a ridiculous company? Because how hard can it be getting your own tissue? And every cancer patient will say, oh my goodness, I'm so glad this exists because I should really struggled with that. Mary Beth, I'm not sure about you, but do you have any experience with this?
My experience was trying to get them to take seriously getting a tissue sample and holding on to a tissue sample. So it took them over 10 weeks to determine what subtype of cancer I had. And then we only had a core needle biopsy. And so I had said, please, let's do another core needle biopsy. Let's get some more tissue
Yeah.
because I want to make sure this is fully sequenced.
Yeah.
And this was in 2020. So I will say, May of 2020 was not a good time in this world. The healthcare community had their hands full. So I just want to make sure I note that I'm very grateful for the care I got. But I was really adamant about trying to get more tissue. And they kept saying, we'll let you know if we need more. Don't worry. We've sent it off. They'll tell us. They'll tell us. Well, it took 3 months at that point for me to get back my yes.
Pretty much. You're waiting. You don't even know what
You,
you have,
you don't
whether you
even
have
know.
cancer, like how bad it is. What, oh my goodness.
And when I finally got the answer back, they said, oh, we didn't have enough tissue, so we weren't able to do the test.
But I told you to get more.
Right. So you understand
Every
what
single
happened.
patient, same story.
Yeah.
As a cancer patient, it is ridiculous, but you need to run the tissue economy. You need to run the inputs, like get more, get it before I get chemo so that it's viable for testing medicines against it, things like that. You got to run the back end. What part is preserved? What part is cooled? What part is cryo preserved? What part is FFPE? And where does all of this go? What stays in the hospital? What goes to my own biobank? What gets sent off to the tests I want to do? It is crazy. And I did 3 biopsies where we got tissue, and 3 times I was not happy with the outcome. And we started this company, Kernus. It's run by a person called Bernardo, and he's doing an amazing job trying to help people with the negotiations by partnering with people in the hospitals who get it, because those also exist. And we're getting kind of learning effects. Like the more frequent we do it, the better we get at it and the more risk we're able to mitigate, which is very different than you're dealing for this for the first time. And you can't imagine that something so relatively simple is so complex.
Yeah. And, tying this back to what end, I in my gut understood that if we didn't understand what was going on in that cancer, then I wasn't going to be able to pull it apart and see what else I could do on top of standard of care. I was doing it not because I thought I was going to have something different than standard of care. I thought it was a great idea to use those drugs. And certainly it was because, I ended up having a super response to it. But I knew that the data, that the information was going to be valuable to me long term. And I couldn't get anyone in my orbit, in my medical orbit, to plug into that with me. It was, they really felt like, well, I don't know what you have to worry about. We have drugs for you. You're all set.
Yeah,
So,
it's insane. They cancer. You're in this kind of competition with the cancer. Cancer is trying to grow. You're trying to prevent it. It evolves over time. And they treat it like a one-off, like we know what the next drug is. Well, that's cute, but I also want to know, like, if it keeps growing, what the next one is. And just the simple concept of a therapeutic ladder, like if it progresses, what are we going to do? Patients have to push very, very hard and come up with a lot of their own input to even agree to a therapeutic ladder with their oncologist, which is surprising.
it is surprising. It is surprising. And again, this was kind of in my core. I just kind of believed this. And as I've learned and researched myself, I've expanded my knowledge, which is we need to understand the drivers for the cancer in totality. The cancer is going to keep growing if we're only shutting down half the problem or a quarter of the problem. We have to shut down all of the problem,
Yeah, there's
right?
like billions of mutations in the cancer already. And if one of them is something that lets it escape the first drug, I have a big problem. So let's make sure we know as much as possible. But also, the medical establishment is sometimes a bit too reluctant to combine drugs. Obviously, you shouldn't combine like chemo drugs that all hit your kidneys and fry your kidney because now you're host. But if they hit different organs or have different side effect profiles, there's something to be said if you're dealing with a super deadly disease that has a very bad prognosis. I think the bar should not be like, oh, has there been a randomized control trial to combine these drugs? And otherwise, I'm just going to say, give a blanket no. I think that that is too high of a bar.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I do believe it is different when you have early stage disease. And in the early stage disease, if they can come to you and say, look, for most people, we can cure your cancer, you know, then it's a different risk scenario,
For
right?
sure.
But if you have metastatic disease, like I do, I'm looking at a different bell curve here. I want a better shot than the statistics say. And that's why I'm doing this podcast. That's why I've done all of this research and I continue to help patients is I know that there are things that we can layer together to improve outcomes. I'm wondering if you can talk about how you have used maybe a drug or therapies that maybe are off-label use or I believe one of the drugs that you're taking or you were taking was I think it's called Yervoy. I was just looking at I know you've made all of your data public, which was very nice of you to help everyone learn. So I was trying to understand, your progress. And that drug was not designed for osteosarcoma, right? Can you talk about how do you go about as a patient figuring out what drugs to layer on and using drugs that might be off label?
Yeah. So Yervoy, that's also known as ipilimumab. It's a CTLA4 checkpoint inhibitor. There are two main checkpoint inhibitors. The most popular one is a PD-1. This is kind of the second most popular one. There's also a third most popular one. For sarcoma, there's not been a convincing trial where combining these two drugs shows that there's not been a big trial of this. So you kind of don't know. Sarcomas are notoriously hard to treat with immune therapy, probably because they're solid tumors, the tumor microenvironment, it's very hard for your immune system to penetrate. We looked at all the literature at length, and our conclusion was that more is more. So rather than only do a PD-1, we did a PD-1 and a CTLA-4. But we added onto that an oncolytic virus that mops up the TGF beta, which helps the tumor hide from the immune system. We added an IL-15 super antagonist, and we did one more immune treatment. On top of that, the treatment we did with the radioligand, it killed most of the FAP tissue, which we suspect was signaling to the neutrophils to keep the immune system at bay. We don't know exactly whether all of this helped. We do know that the T cell infiltration in the tumor went from like 20% to 90% plus. The exact numbers are on osteosarc.com. But it greatly, a lot more T cell infiltration and also the right T cells, the CD4s. And by the way, I'm not a doctor. I might have messed some of this up, what I describe here. Please forgive me. All the data is online. Look at the data. Don't listen to me. But what we suspect is that we were able to really rile up the immune system. And then when we did the radioactive treatment, that immediately kills the cell. So it doesn't wait for division. It goes kill the cells immediately. That might have turned it hot to the immune system. I think if you look at the standard of care, the odds of dying of the cancer are 2-3 orders of magnitude higher than dying from the treatment effects. As a patient, my preference is to die from the treatment. It's a much better way to go than dying from cancer. I think that that's not everyone's preference, but I think 2-3 orders of magnitude is very far off from what probably would be desired by most patients. And I think that the system is failing metastatic cancer patients in a massive way here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. My attitude is the same, which is I'd rather go down fighting it. I'd rather go down trying and feeling like I haven't applied the best logic I possibly can. Um, just I wouldn't be satisfied with that. You learn a lot in your lifetime, right? And there's a lot that is free for knowledge out there. And now with AI, everyone has access to this kind of knowledge. When I was first starting out in 2020, the first anti-cancer strategy that I was researching, it took me 2 months of researching. And I have a background in market research, and I'm pretty good around technical stuff. So, 2 months to read through all of the literature and understand what it was, what the dose would be, how this would affect me, what was the mechanism of action, how would it work with my drugs? Like, to understand all of that was months of work. And nowadays, you could do the same sort of thing in less than 2 hours with AI. You'd have to just know the
For
questions.
sure.
So I think that this is something that's coming to a head as we're talking about technology and healthcare are really coming together to create some big change. And I see more and more patients saying, "What else can I do? What else can I do?" And the answer is there's more, but you need to know your data, right? You need to make decisions based on something, right? Solve a problem, but you have to understand what the problem is.
Yeah,
And that's the first challenge in healthcare that we were talking
for
about.
sure. The Bible used to be in Latin, and now it's English. People are able to start reading it, and they don't like what's happening to them. They don't like that they get treated in a minimized liability to the hospital way instead of maximizing survivability. And the medical establishment has not been clear on what they've been doing, and people are starting to figure it out.
Yeah.
One document that I would like to kind of write and publish is a maximized survivability directive. It wouldn't be something that your doctor sends to you, but it would be something you bring to the meeting to indicate your preferences. And preferably, it's signed not just by you, but also your loved ones, because doctors don't get sued by dead patients. They get sued by family members.
True.
And I think what made doctors comfortable in my case, that we came prepared to the meetings, we knew what we were talking about, but also my wife joined. She also knew what she was talking about. She was asking really relevant, really nuanced questions. So the doctors knew that she knew exactly what we were signing up for. And that there's no way to sign away medical liability. And so I think there's a role for the patient here to get the doctors comfortable with your understanding, but much more importantly, the understanding of your loved ones, because their insurance rates are also already really expensive. They need to protect themselves, and the hospital need to protect itself. So the legal environment has put a big burden on the patient to navigate this.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So I approached it a slightly different way, but I saw the same problem. And I didn't approach it from a legal perspective, which I love what you're saying with this document. I think that's fabulous. I called my medical resume. And in it, I had an objective and I had a description of why, what I thought was achievable. And that I tried to communicate that, look, I'm rational. It's not that I do not understand the diagnosis and the risks, et cetera. I do. And let me explain that to you. But I felt like it was important to tell them my mindset up front, and explain what I wanted, and so that we could be on the same page. But what I was missing was the legal aspect, and I love that you're bringing that up because that is an important one. So, do you have a company, or do you even need a company to be able to push something like that forward? Can you do that with your foundation?
No, you don't need I don't think you need a company. I think we just, as a foundation, will probably just publish a text. I haven't written it. Punima, if you're listening, I'm waiting for it. But also, people, if you have ideas, or Mary Beth, if you have an idea, let's just publish something and then take it from there. I want to work with patients, and let's see what the doctors say, and let's kind of address their concerns and evolve the document over time.
I think that's fantastic because one of the questions I had for you is, how does a patient go about trying to work with an oncologist if they want to color outside the lines a little bit and try to add some adjunct therapies onto
Yeah.
their standard of care? How do you recommend that they talk to those doctors? What do you think? How'd you do it?
Yeah. So realize that it's an opt-in. Like you're never given a choice. There's not going to be some checkbox. The doctor's not going to ask you. You have to kind of figure this out online, maybe listening to this podcast or somewhere else, that there's something beyond the standard of care. Then you have to indicate your preferences to the doctor, to typically an oncologist. And you got to understand the perspective of the oncologist. If they suggest something, there's a higher liability for them. So they're probably not going to make suggestions. Also, they might not know about everything that's available. Also, you have a lot more time to spend on your case than they have the payers only will pay for a certain number of hours. You're already going to be a very a very expensive patient in hours with all your questions and stuff like that. They're not going to research everything. You're dealing with a deadly disease. Have yourself, or if you can't, hopefully you have a loved one, either a spouse or a child, help you with that research. Use AI, put your files in it, and then start exploring what makes sense, and then start asking questions. The AI is likely to come up with suggestions. Not all of them will be great. You still need a medical professional in the loop, both to check it and get rid of the bad suggestions, but also, of course, to dose it. Now, not every oncologist is going to be open to this. So I find that a lot of them are, but let's say it's 50-50 or something like that. You might have to switch oncologists. You might have to add a new oncologist. One thing that's hard to find out is like, who are providers of these things? It changes all the time. So with our foundation, we have a project called Future of Cancer Care Today, and we'll take a call with anybody who wants to look beyond. And we, on our website, but also in the calls, we're very aware of what's available in the world, and we can help you with that part. We won't coordinate your care. We're not a medical concierge service. We'll just help you see the options.
That's a huge gift, a huge gift. So thank you so much for doing that as part of your foundation. I know you are at the forefront of the latest, cutting edge opportunities. And I know even as recent, I believe is like a week ago, you were at Houston Methodist getting a personalized mRNA cancer vaccine, I believe.
Yeah,
Can you talk about cancer vaccine technology and why cancer patients should be looking at that as something that could be very helpful, perhaps in the future? I know there's some clinical trials out there.
yeah. It's certainly not standard of care today, and it's certainly not something that everyone should do. It does look like personalized mRNA vaccines for cancer hold a lot of promise. There's been some studies that show promise. There's been some studies where they don't perform well. So it's a really new area, and the efficacy is questionable. However, they tend to have a really good safety profile. So they tend to be safe. They might not help with curing you, but as long as the safety profile is effective, now it's a question of, can you get one? How much does it cost if you have to pay yourself and everything else? Or can you have the burden of traveling to it? But it's promising. And the nice thing here is we can use the sequencing data to design the vaccines. And that translation step is getting better because we're learning more as humanity. The AI keeps getting better. And I'm really excited. I have a personalized mRNA vaccine, and I'm already looking at building a new one with all the stuff we learned over the last year. So I think it's a very exciting technology, mainly because it's safer than a lot of other cancer drugs.
And when you say safer, I believe that you mean really two things. One is that it's not going to, you're not going to die from it. But two, also side effects. It doesn't tend to have many side effects. Is that true?
Yeah, correct. Safer safety profile. So that's not dying, but it's also all the other things. For example, the immune checkpoint inhibitors, especially at CTLA-4 that can cause a lot of inflammation. I think typically lung inflammation, but all kinds of other pretty nasty side effects. The mRNA ones, vaccines on the margin compared to cancer drugs are very, very safe. Um, I got personally, I got fatigued, mild fatigue by one, but that's greatly preferable to some of the side effect profiles of some other things. So that's what's exciting. And the fact that this is one of the things that will benefit most from increased sequencing and AI that's available.
Now, I want to contrast cutting edge cancer vaccines with something that's more old school. Do you also look at adjunct therapies that are things like exercise, um, your diet? Are you looking at your microbiome? Are you doing adjunct therapies in that realm as well, or are you just focusing on drugs and technology?
No, the microbiome is probably really important. It's just that we don't understand a lot. I am measuring my microbiome and trying to learn lessons from it. I don't think there's been any major lessons yet, but we're just when I went founder mode, I decided let's do all the sequencing that's available. There's really good sequencing available now and imaging. So I'm trying to do all.
So I'll wrap up with a closing question for you, because I'm thinking about all those patients out there. They want to do as much of what you're doing as possible, since you have taken yourself from a point where standard of care said there's nothing more we can do for you, and now you're sitting in front of me, and as I understand it, you don't have evidence of disease currently. Is that right?
Yeah, correct
Yeah.
for 1 year.
So, what are a couple of things that patients can do right away to help themselves to follow in your footsteps and to try to have better outcomes?
Yeah. First of all, beyond standard of care, it doesn't make sense for everyone. And so if you have a cancer with a great survivability, great standard of care, like you might not need to look beyond. Second thing, it might not be for everyone. It's a lot of extra time and effort, but also a lot of psychological stress because now you're taking responsibility for your own treatment. That's a life or death thing. For some people, it might actually be better to defer to someone else so they they don't have to worry about it as much. If you do want to look beyond, probably for a lot of people, cost is going to be a big factor. This costs of sequencing are coming down. So there's a provider now that does bulk RNA for $50. There's a provider now that does whole genome for $500. Problem is getting your tissue out and getting them to that to getting it sent. That is typically more expensive. The AI tools are amazingly affordable. Uploading your whole case data and then asking AI questions is an incredibly powerful thing you can do. Pushing for treatments in parallel where it makes sense from the side effect profiles. Sometimes that extra treatment is covered by insurance. Sometimes it's a generic, which is available at a doable cost. Talking with Future of Cancer Care today, it's free. Those are some suggestions to start looking at.
That's awesome. And I will put in the show notes links to the Future of Cancer Care today so that patients and people who have listened to this podcast can go there and get some advice. And I just want to thank you so much for your time today and for sharing all of your information and your story so openly with everyone. We are learning from you and we are cheering you on in your own care and what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Mary Beth. Thanks so much for this great conversation, and maybe we should continue it in the future.
I would love that. Thank you. And now, an important announcement. All the information that was provided today was for educational purposes only. I'm a patient, just like you. I am not a licensed or accredited physician, therapist, or clinical researcher. All information provided is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, therapist, nutritionist, or any other qualified healthcare professional.